A little over 60 years ago, on the 21st of January 1966, a Mini Cooper S won the world's most prestigious rally for the third time in a row. But the fallout of that year's Monte Carlo Rally threatened to bring the whole thing tumbling down. So today on Twin Cam, this is the story of how 10 cars were shockingly disqualified for a part that cost pennies. It goes without saying that the Mini Cooper is a motorsport icon, and indeed you and I have covered the wider story of both the Mini and the Mini Cooper before. So for now I'll put a card up in the corner if you'd like to join me on a day hustling about this beautiful Mark 1 1275S. If not, however, then I'd like to introduce you to three of the world's most famous Minis. The trio piloted by Paddy Hopkirk, Timo Mäkinen and Rauno Aaltonen on their way to winning Rallye Monte-Carlo in 1964, 65 and 67. But that missing year, 1966, could or should have made it a quartet. Before we get there, however, I'd like to address our collective perception. The escapades of Paddy Hopkirk and Henry Liddon aboard 33 EJB have gone down in history as some kind of watershed moment, an unprecedented shock result against the giants of the motorsport world, catapulting BMC's Mini into both popularity and folklore. The truth, however, is rather less momentous. Right from its launch in August 1959, Alec Izagonis's car for the district nurse was being touted as a future club racing car, and BMC's press department made the fortuitous decision to lend one to a certain John Cooper, who took it down to Monza with him for that September's Italian Grand Prix. This was an important weekend, as with Jack Brabham and Bruce McLaren at the wheel, the Cooper T51 was about to become the first ever mid-engine Formula One world champion. Yet between sessions, the paddock descended on this funny-looking new car. The Mini's superlative steering, brakes and suspension led former Ferrari engineer Aurelio Lampredi to term it the car of the future. And 10 years later, he'd be a part of the team who defined the modern Super Mini. John Cooper, however, had more immediate plans. Having bought and tuned his own, he took it to see both Alec Izagonis and BMC's managing director, George Harriman. And on the 20th of September 1961, the 997cc Mini Cooper was born. In the meantime, the standard 850 Mini had well and truly made its entrance. At one point in 1960, Austin Sevens and Morris Mini Minors made up 19% of the entire British car market, while Sheila O'Clery took the Mini to its first international rally success in the Cork 20. The following year, a Mini would win the British Saloon Car Championship, going back-to-back in 62 with one of the first Mini Coopers, a car that was undoubtedly a marriage of convenience. The Mini's success was already assured, and a chap we'll become familiar with, Stuart Turner, head of BMC's competitions department, recognised its value in marketing. Cooper would win from advertising his name on a popular saloon car, while BMC gained a free works racing team and a shed-load of pedigree from the now back-to-back Formula One world champions. Indeed, the first Mini Cooper was developed entirely in-house, winning the British Rally Championship in both 62 and 63, while Rauno Aaltonen would take one to the podium of the 1963 Monte Carlo Rally. The following year, therefore, Paddy Hopkirk's conquest was not an upset in the new 1071cc Mini Cooper S. Now, of course, BMC's marketing team ran with the narrative of a David versus Goliath giant-killing victory, and their success in doing so is reflected in how people continue to perceive the Mini. Stuart Turner's team may not have been the wealthiest in the field, but they had a brilliant car and they came well prepared. Paddy Hopkirk himself said they practiced relentlessly, and while he maintained the narrative of not going out to win, there's just too much prior evidence of the Mini's brilliance to suggest anything less than a very good result. What the 64 Monte did do, however, was propel the Mini into the cultural stratosphere, cementing it as a classic and endearing enthusiasts to it. Paddy Hopkirk received a telegram from the Beatles, and that builds a very important image for today's purposes. So with that context out of the way, we move to the following season. The World Rally Championship didn't exist 60 odd years ago, but Monte Carlo was the opening round of the European Rally Championship, and of the 13 rounds held in 1965, the even faster Mini Cooper 1275S won 7 of them. Rauno Aaltonen and Tony Ambrose winning the series in an era when international rallying was much more relatable to the cars you'd see on street corners. At the Monte that year, eventual championship runners-up Timo Mäkinen and Paul Easter would romp to victory, the Mini's second success in the snow coming a whole 20 minutes, not 20 seconds, 20 minutes ahead of a Porsche 904. Come the start of '66, therefore, BMC's works-entered Minis were expected to compete, if not wipe the floor. The 35th Rallye Monte-Carlo was held between the 14th and the 20th of January, only this time the FIA had rewritten the Sporting Code's Appendix J, the article regulating race and rally cars, meaning new cars built to new rules. AJB 44B, Mäkinen's winner from '65, was entered that year as a Group 3 car, meaning Stuart Turner's team could make a few modifications. As if a standard Mini was lardy, this one had an aluminium bonnet, an aluminium boot and aluminium doors. It had plastic windows, 2-inch speed holes drilled throughout the body, and even the heater box was replaced with an alloy unit. The number plates were replaced by stickers. The grille was lightened, the underseal was removed, and even the exhaust was remade with a thinner material. Despite extended wheel arches, an extra 5 driving lights, and even a nice bucket seat inside, the final score was a 23 kilogram drop compared to a standard car, or £50 if you're watching in black and white. The suspension was standard, though Mäkinen preferred the older rubber cone suspension to the newer, softer hydroelastic system. I'm led to believe that the engine was then bored out from its usual 1275 to 1293cc, while the cylinder head received the usual finessing plus a healthy skim, increasing compression to 11:1. With a nice lumpy camshaft, they extracted 75 brake horsepower at the wheels. In preparing for '66, however, BMC knew that this kind of car would no longer be competitive due to a new timing system, which saw Group 2 cars receive an 18% handicap. Essentially, the FIA were mandating an overall winner homologated for Group 1, otherwise known as the car you could buy in the dealer. The comps department would build 3 Group 1 Minis for the '66 Monte. The first would be registered as GRX 5D for Paddy Hopkirk and Henry Liddon. The second was GRX 55D for Rauno Aaltonen and Tony Ambrose. And the third car was GRX 555D for Timo Mäkinen and Paul Easter. For the sake of clarity, it's worth mentioning that 33 EJB, Hopkirk's winner from the '64 Monte, was also a Group 1 car. But of course, the new Appendix J was published in August '65, so between that season's adventures, they had 4 months before homologation in December. Before getting their hands dirty, however, Turner and his team had to understand the regulations, which once translated and distributed, caused serious consternation in their total lack of clarity. Understandably, the teams had questions and demanded clarifications. The RAC, Britain's Royal Automobile Club, organised a trip to Paris, where BMC's Stuart Turner, Ford's Henry Taylor and the Roots Group's Marcus Chambers could discuss the fine details. For getting things right really mattered, not just for legality, but also timing, as the short turnaround led to many constructors rushing. According to Motorsport, many cars were entered blind, their manufacturers hoping the FIA would homologate them, and in the end, Alfa Romeo, Renault and Volvo missed out, their cars only competing in Group 2 and all but confirmed not to be winners. Indeed, the Works Saab team felt so alienated that they withdrew. According to the bulletin, a Group 1 racer had to retain almost every feature of its road-based counterpart, of which 5,000 must be built over a 12-month period, even down to the seats and the steering wheel. Entries were afforded a pair of gearbox and final drive ratios, plus new friction material in the brakes, and 2 additional headlamps. And that's pretty much it. In the meantime, this vagueness led to clarifications what felt like every 5 minutes, and the FIA were eventually forced to publish an updated set of rules which, to add insult to injury, were not even distributed to any of the British teams. Speaking to the BBC, BMC's own Richard Shepherd stated that they rebuilt the 3 Group 1 Minis twice and had the RAC repeatedly inspect them for legality before setting off. But set off they did, and back then your Monte Carlo Rally began in one of 9 different cities. Paddy Hopkirk started in Warsaw, Rauno Aaltonen in Athens and Timo Mäkinen in Lisbon. Come Sunday evening, the 3 had made it safely to the Principality, and of 171 remaining competitors, BMC were eyeing up the first Monte Carlo hat-trick since 1932. In the first 24 hours of competition, they had 900 miles and 6 special stages to cover, only 88 making it through. Paddy Hopkirk and Rauno Aaltonen both came unstuck on the Col de Grania, a 30-mile stage coated in thick, packed snow, and as you'd expect, they fitted chisel stud tyres. Timo Mäkinen began this stage second on the road and dominated, but come the others' turn, that snow had turned into a powder, and the understeer therefore suffered, caused Hopkirk to stop, swapping the chisels for shorter pop-in studs, but only on the front axle. The ensuing oversteer then threw him into the scenery. In the meantime, his car began to misfire, but progress was otherwise so good that he still finished the day in 5th place, a minute behind the 2nd place Aaltonen and 3 behind Mäkinen. On Wednesday night, the leading 60 cars took on the mountain circuit. 380 miles and another 6 stages, all in clear weather, but temperatures as low as minus 25 degrees C. Dancing again on the packed snow. Having made up some time, Hopkirk brought his car into service for brakes, fuel and tyres, but a routine fluid check uncovered a popped head gasket. With little time to spare, they simply chucked a bottle of Wonderweld into the rad and powered on through, Paddy and Henry working their poorly Mini through the night. Rauno Aaltonen's Mini was mechanically perfect, but on his second of 3 runs over the famous Col de Torini, he smacked his car's near-side front wing into a snowbank, trapping the wheel. With some percussive maintenance and a fresh tyre, Aaltonen and Ambrose lost around a minute on the road, all but handing victory to the faultless Mäkinen and Easter. In the closing stages, Rauno reckoned his car was handling strangely, the crash having knocked out the alignment, but nonetheless, their 2nd place was very much secure. On Thursday, the cars gradually made it down to the harbour, with 155 miles worth of stages to cover, and on the road, the Group 1 Mini Cooper S's of Mäkinen, Aaltonen and Hopkirk finished 1st, 2nd and 3rd. 4th was Roger Clark's Lotus Cortina, followed by Pauli Toivonen's Citroën DS and Rosemary Smith's Hillman Imp. But even there and then, BMC's celebrations were relatively muted. They'd completed a hat-trick of Monte Carlo victories, but throughout the rally, the scrutineers had slowly been assembling. The first real sign of trouble was on Tuesday, before the leaders took to the mountain, when officials posted a notice questioning the legality of the British entry's headlamps. Regardless, the cars were released from scrutineering and were allowed to continue. But while we're here, what exactly did the 3 Minis look like? Well, they were entered as Group 1 cars, essentially showroom models, but what did that really entail? Let's take Mäkinen's winner, GRX 555D, as our example, and ostensibly it was a standard car, just carefully prepared to go rallying. The engine had to remain at 1275cc, while its camshaft, cylinder head and 9 3/4 to 1 compression were all standard as well. The powertrain was merely balanced, not lightened, and with M-type needles and red springs in the dinky 1 1/4 inch carburetors, plus a standard exhaust, Turner's men extracted 67 brake horsepower at the wheels. In feeding that, the fuel lines and pump, plus brake pipes and the battery cable, had to stay on the outside of the car, though protected by aluminium plating. The famous right-hand fuel tank so many S's had fitted was only an optional extra, and it wasn't homologated, so they could only run with the left-hand tank. This meant a working range of only 70 odd miles, so the support crew kept themselves busy by filling up the cars between stages. An indication of just how last minute all this was is the fact that the body shells were supplied to the comps department with the hole for the second filler neck, which was blanked off in service. Similarly, the 4.5J wheels were not homologated, so they went rallying on wheels that were 3.5 inches wide. Fortunately, the optional straight cut gearbox was homologated, so that was used with a 4.133 to 1 differential, and as it was no longer in production, the cone type suspension was out, replaced by heavy duty hydrolastic units raised by 1/100 of an inch and fitted with stiffer bump stops. As mentioned earlier on, they were free to fit Ferodo pads and linings in the brakes, a bit of a godsend when your drivers include Rauno Aaltonen and Timo Mäkinen, who don't believe in the existence of the clutch pedal, and balance the car with left foot braking while remaining virtually flat out with their right. The standard material would have glazed over on the very first stage. Inside, they had an asbestos panel to guard the fuel tank from the studded spare tyre, while the door bins, pillars, etc. all had padding for the sake of safety. Naturally, they were allowed to fit a pair of alloy panels to the dashboard for all the timing equipment, but as I mentioned earlier, the seats had to be standard. And if you know anything about minis, you'll know that's not a good thing. The optional reclining seats had not been homologated, so the usual and entirely unsupportive fixed seats it was, merely fitted with bolstered Corobes covers and a headrest for Paul Easter. That was all fine and above board, but here's the cheeky bit. Early minis had rubber coupling inner drive shafts, which were fine, but not especially strong. Fresh for the time were stronger Hardy Spicer universal joints, while at the back they fitted Timken needle roller wheel bearings. In fitting these parts, Stuart Turner had passed well through cheeky into taking the piss and was right on the edge of downright illegal. You see, the former were fitted as standard parts, but the latter weren't quite there yet, and neither had hit the 5,000 car threshold. But we'll keep that between us. The other contentious point was the car's electrical systems, which all had to remain in place save for a heavy-duty dynamo to power the heated windscreen and the additional lighting through a second wiring loom. On paper, this was entirely legal, but with the rules in precision, they modified the standard headlamps to match the fogs. Standard production minis have a single headlamp on each side of the car, and when you turn them on, they're dipped, as you'd expect. But in order to change the beam pattern, they have dual filament bulbs. So when, on my later car, I tip back the stalk, the dipped filament goes out and the main filament takes over. Fine. The Lucas 700 fog lamps fitted to the rally cars were fitted with single filament quartz iodine bulbs, and these then made their way into the normal headlamps. To make all this work, the dipped beam was wired up to extinguish the wing-mounted lamps, leaving the fogs to act as the headlamps. The whole system was controlled through a dim dip resistor and a rheostat on the dashboard, something they'd used for the previous 2 years and had never seen a problem with. Indeed, all the Group 1 cars from British manufacturers, including Roger Clark's Cortina and Rosemary Smith's Imp, were fitted with similar systems, and under the first edition of the rules, nothing was remotely amiss. In fact, a few British Group 2 cars rocked up having not seen the latest revision and were disqualified on the spot for having too many headlamps, something they could only have known had they read the version of Appendix J destined for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. If that wasn't dodgy enough, then the manner in which the Group 1 cars were treated will certainly raise some eyebrows. Earlier on, I mentioned the notice posted before the leaders ascended the mountain, and in fear of the consequences, the Ford team swapped the headlamps of Clark's Cortina for the original factory items. Come the morning of Friday, the 21st of January, the 4 leading drivers were invited to see the stewards, who whisked away the podium-sitting Minis and ladies' prize-winning Hillman to ruthlessly inspect over the next 18 hours. The cars were stripped to their bones, the officials even counting the teeth on the gears and removing the tyres from the wheels to weigh each individually, but no infraction was uncovered. Of course, they missed the drive shafts and the rear wheel bearings, indicating quite clearly the level of incompetence we're dealing with, but soon enough they announced to the top 4 drivers that they'd been disqualified because their headlamps weren't yellow, which French cars then were. This was soon retracted, replaced by a charge just for the Minis of their front tracks being too wide. I'm led to believe that Paddy Hopkirk recounts there being a third reason, before finally that was retracted, replaced by the charge of non-standard single filament headlamp bulbs. The most intriguing part of this conclusion, however, is the fact that Roger Clark's 4th place Cortina was not inspected at all, confirming that disqualification was ultimately based on a problem they found some 3 days earlier. Now, a great many motorsport figures don't read rules in black ink. Instead, they look between the lines to figure out what hasn't been said. Anyone who follows top-level motorsport will know that the FIA are constantly clarifying and tweaking regulations because people keep pushing their luck. That's how competition works, and even Stuart Turner himself is reported to have said that the rally begins once we receive the rules. So, to be fair to the FIA, these 10 British cars, including the 6 Minis of Mäkinen, Aaltonen and Hopkirk, Raymond Baxter, yes that one, Stephen Silverthorne and Howard Power, plus the Cortinas of Clark and John Davenport, the Ford Corsair of Horace Appleby and Rosemary Smith's Imp were all fairly disqualified for headlamp-based violations. Only all the incompetence-related mitigations plus the back and forth after the event paint a rather different image. Now sure, John Davenport found it understandable, writing in Motorsport that they should have known not to run these bulbs, and as a bare minimum, they should have requested clarification. But this was caveated with the final rules having not been received, while Hopkirk and Aaltonen asserted that there must have been a conspiracy. Timo Mäkinen was rather more concise, stating simply that we was robbed. In the end, the Citroën DS of Pauli Toivonen and Ensio Makanda, which finished 5th on the road, was declared the winner. But it wasn't as if the British were merely pushed aside. Toivonen initially refused to attend the podium and was forced into doing so by Citroën, but Monaco's Crown Prince, Ranier III, could not be coerced and left as prize-giving began. None of the British teams attended the farewell dinner, and months later the FIA rejected BMC's appeal. In this context, it's easy to see why some viewed it as an anti-British conspiracy, ensuring a French sporting body defended a French victory in an event largely held in the south of France. Of course, Rallye Monte-Carlo is organised by the Automobile Club de Monaco, but it's not much of a reach to connect the dots. Now, I'm not going to sit here as an absolute layman and call this a conspiracy, either in favour of the French or against a hat-trick for the Minis. But there is no denying the sheer ineptitude displayed by the officials, and as it was widely perceived to be a slight against the British, a BMC official told the BBC that this will be the end of the Monte Carlo Rally. Britain is certain to withdraw. In the coming weeks and months, however, tensions certainly subsided, as following the '64 Monte, when Paddy Hopkirk won the Minis first, BMC were invited to appear on Sunday night at the London Palladium, garnering an expanse of media attention. But in 1965, it was just more of the same. After being disqualified, however, they went on the telly again, and as Paddy himself said, it gave the Mini 10 times as much publicity as if we'd won. I don't know whether Timo Mäkinen would have been quite so relaxed, but having regrouped, Aaltonen won that year's Tulip and Czech rallies. Hopkirk won the Austrian Rally, while Mäkinen won the Thousand Lakes and Three City rallies, and Tony Fall won the Polish Rally. It wasn't enough for BMC to win the overall championship, but come January '67, Rauno Aaltonen wiped the floor again, beating both Lancia and Porsche to win the Mini's third and final Monte. They gave it one more try in '68, but in a year of dry, snow-free stages, Porsche finally found their place. A trio of 911s beating the Minis, which came home in third, fourth and fifth. The footnote, however, is that a very similar thing could well have happened. Their carburetors this time coming under scrutiny, while the winning Porsches were left virtually untouched. Regardless, the Mini's race and rally success bred an image of desirability, gradually allowing it to break through on the European stage, meaning 1971 will be the car's best year for overall production. But of course, BMC's European dealer network was far from perfect, and as Britain remained outside the single market till '73, the Mini was held back by 17.5% tariffs before the Fiat 127 and Renault 5 made it largely obsolete. Time waits for nobody, and the newly formed British Leyland closed the Abingdon-based Works Rally team. Stuart Turner, Timo Mäkinen and Henry Liddon all later ended up at Ford, where the Escort needs no introduction. But with that, thank you very much for watching. As this topic is a rather controversial one, and frankly I'm new to most of this information, I'd like to extend an invitation to anyone with more detail, clarifications or outright corrections to anything I've mentioned in this video. Feel free to leave a comment down below if that is the case. But if you enjoyed the video, then please do click like and subscribe to TwinCam as well. I'm forever indebted to my wonderful Patreon supporters, so if you'd like to support me that way, then please do follow the link in the description. And I'll have more videos coming along soon.